Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ali. And tonight I bring you another tafsir halaqah. We are dealing with Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Quran, a section dealing with marriage matters. And we are starting with verse number 221 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Let me begin by praising our creator and fashioner, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. I thank you all for joining us from around the globe, and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is keeping you all and your loved ones safe and healthy and happy. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you all from COVID-19 and from every other sickness and disease and stress. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you every happiness in this life and the life hereafter. So let me get started with my presentation for this week. So I will share my screen, and where is that screen? This is the one. Share. So here we go. Marriage matters. I will start this presentation. There's a slideshow right from the beginning. And here it is. So marriage matters. Quran, Surah 2, verse number 221 to 227. These are the verses we'll cover tonight. Just to put this in perspective, you will recall that over the last several sessions, we've been dealing with a larger section of Surah Al-Baqarah, the last half of Surah Al-Baqarah, or within the last half, starting with verse number 168. These I've entitled New Laws for a New Community. And under that broader banner, last time we were looking at Allah's answers to people's questions and a few verses, and now tonight we're dealing with marriage matters, verses 221 to 225. Actually, I'll go up to 227, despite my keeping of the old suggestion from last week. Last week I suggested that this week we'll do up to verse 225, but in looking at the section more closely, I've decided to include those extra couple of verses so that next week's session will not be too long. Okay, so we're starting with verse number 221. Men, hold off on marrying polytheistic females until they believe. Even if a polytheistic female pleases you, a believing bondwoman is better than her. Likewise, hold off on marrying off your girls to polytheistic men until they believe. Again, even if a polytheist pleases you, a believing bondman is better than him. Polytheists may lead you towards the fire, whereas Allah calls you to the garden and to forgiveness by His grace. Allah expounds His revelations for people so that they may pay heed. O Prophet, men are asking you about menstruation. Say, it is disagreeable. So, stay aloof of the menstrual flow and do not approach consummate intimacy until your wives are free of the flow. Once they have cleansed themselves, you may approach them in the way that Allah has ordered you. Allah loves those who turn to Him and those who clean themselves. Because I've stumbled there, let me redo this. Verse 222. O Prophet, men are asking you about menstruation. Say, it is disagreeable. So stay aloof of the menstrual flow and do not approach a consummate intimacy until your wives are free of the flow. Once they have cleansed themselves, you may approach them in the way that Allah has ordered you. Allah loves those who turn to Him and those who clean themselves. During the clean period, your wives can become pregnant, so you may try to have children whenever you both wish, and send ahead something for yourselves. Be conscious of Allah, knowing that you will eventually meet Him. Give glad tidings to believers. Believers, do not let your oaths by Allah be an obstacle preventing you from obeying Allah, acting kindly, and making peace among people. Allah hears and knows everything. Allah will not seize you for unintentional oaths, but He will hold you responsible for whatever your hearts have truly earned. Allah is forgiving and forbearing. If a man vows to abstain from his wife, he shall be given a limit of 4 months to make up his mind about her. If he cancels his vow, let him know that Allah is forgiving, merciful. But if he decides to divorce her, let him know that Allah hears and knows everything. So those are the verses that I wanted to deal with tonight. Now, we can look at the Arabic text of these verses and look at some salient points and go into a bit more detail. Okay, I'll keep my watch and view here so that we do not go inordinately long. Okay, verse number 221. لا تنكحوا المشركات حتى يؤمن ولا أمة مؤمنة خير من مشركة ولو أعجبتكم ولا تنكحوا المشركين حتى يؤمنوا ولا عبد مؤمن خير من مشرك ولو أعجبكم أولئك يدعون إلى النار والله يدعو إلى الجنة والمغفرة بإذنه ويبين آياته للناس لعلهم يتذكرون. Do not marry idolatresses until they embrace faith. A faithful slave girl is better than an idolatress, although she should impress you. And do not marry your daughters to idolaters until they embrace faith. A faithful slave is better than an idolater, although he should impress you. Those invite others to the fire, but Allah invites you to paradise and pardon by His will. And He clarifies His signs for the people, so that they may take admonition. So this is the translation and transliteration that I've culled from this website, https alquran.info. So to continue. ويسألونك عن المحيض قل هو أذى فاعتزلوا النساء في المحيض ولا تقربوهن حتى يطهرن فإذا تطهرن فأتوهن من حيث أمركم الله إن الله يحب التوابين ويحب المتطهرين. They ask you concerning intercourse during menses. Say, it is hurtful. So keep away from wives during the menses, and do not approach them until they are clean. And when they become clean, go into them, as Allah has commanded you. Indeed, Allah loves the penitent, and He loves those who keep clean. So they have added some footnotes here. So hurtful, they've added, or offensive. Now, the reason for that ambivalence between the meanings is that the term itself, adha, in Arabic could have a variety of meanings. In the Quran itself, it is used something like 14 times. And it means something like something disagreeable, something offensive. It could be like an injury, or it could mean in one case it is a scalp irritation. For example, we have actually just come across this verse a few sessions previous when we dealt with Hajj. So there it is mentioned that if somebody is on the way to perform Hajj, and they're in the ihram, so they are not to shave their heads until their sacrifices reach the destination. However, if somebody has a scalp irritation, that person has the permission to shave the head, and then they have a way of atoning for that. So the term for the scalp irritation there is adhan, which means something like an irritation in that case. So adhan fi ra'sihi, he has an irritation in his scalp. So here, so the term adhan could be translated as an irritation, as something disagreeable, something hurtful. It could be something painful as well, and so on. And of course, we know that women's experiences are varied one from another, and so it's difficult to pinpoint the exact meaning of that term in this context. And in my translation, I've given it as disagreeable, and I think that suffices. And now to continue, so let me read the translation one more time. They ask you concerning intercourse during menses. Say, it is hurtful, so keep away from wives during the menses, and do not approach them until they are clean. And when they become clean, go into them, as Allah has commanded you. Indeed, Allah loves the penitent, and He loves those who keep clean. Now, there are two mentions here of clean, and in the most common reading of the Quran, it's the first mention is yathorn. They become clean. So this could refer to them becoming naturally clean, or in some other readings which are acceptable in the Muslim Ummah, that too says tataharna. So they have cleansed themselves. So when they have cleansed themselves, the second mention of the clean here actually is that same verse, فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ, when they have cleansed themselves. So this is a deliberate cleansing. So there is a little slight ambiguity there in that, when does it become halal again to have the consummate relationship? So we can see two stages. One is the possibility that the woman has become free of the flow, and then later on she takes the bath. So what about this period in between her becoming free of the flow and then taking the bath? So that period remains a little, that short window remains slightly ambiguous because of the common reading of the Quran, or given the common reading of the Quran, that short window of time is a little bit ambiguous. But what is definitely clear on all of the readings is that once the woman has taken her bath, or to stick with the Quranic language, when she has deliberately cleansed herself, then this becomes permissible again. All right. So, of course, if you have questions in the local community, I will deal with that towards the end. Okay, 223. نساؤكم حرث لكم نساؤكم حرث لكم فأتوا حرثكم أن شئتم وقدموا لأنفسكم واتقوا الله واعلموا أنكم ملاقوه وبشر المؤمنين. Your women are a tillage for you, so come to your tillage whenever you like and send ahead for your souls. And be God wary, and know that you will encounter him and give good news to the faithful. Now, one of the difficulties with looking at verses of the Quran arises from taking them a piecemeal, like one verse at a time, and not seeing the connection and connectivity between the verses. So this verse closely follows from the previous one. And the previous one was talking about the period of the flow, and then the period of the cleanliness when a man could approach his wife for the consummate relationship. This verse follows precisely from that, in that it is saying, basically, in my humble understanding, that once the woman has now entered the clean period, this is the time in which she can become pregnant. So this is the time in which it is right for couples to seek to have a child. And so it is, the way it is normally translated is sticking closely to the Arabic, and the Arabic word here is harth, which our translators here have given as tillage. Sometimes it is given as cultivation. So it gives an imagery, to be sure, as men would have at that time cared for their plantations and their crops. So they're being told here, okay, your wives are fulfilling that function for you in that they are bringing children into the world, so you should value them even more than you value the crops and your plantations and so on. But to use that terminology today, I have found from my humble experience that it's not received well by non-Muslims in particular. They find it strange that women might be referred to in this way. And so in my translation, I have given it something like women can, during the clean period, women can become pregnant. So try to have children whenever you are both agreeable to that, or when you're both when you both wish. So that avoids that terminology, though of course our translators here, as I've said, they have stuck close to the Arabic text of the Quran, and they've given a kind of a word-for-word translation. And that's good for those who want to learn the Arabic language, so they can see that that word means this. But for those who are just reading the English translation of the Quran, especially without the accompanying Arabic text, and they just want to get the message of the Quran. If we translate word for word, in this case, we may give the wrong impression to those readers. So let me read it to one more time. Your women are a tillage for you. So come to your tillage whenever you like, and send ahead for your souls, and be God weary, and know that you will encounter him, and give good news to the faithful. Now, you notice here that it says, so come to your tillage whenever you like. And this is an obvious address to the men. But when we see the surrounding verses, verses that we won't have the time to deal with tonight, but we'll deal with not next week, but the week after, we will see that, in fact, the Quran shows that there should be mutual agreement within the family relationship. So when it comes to deciding matters, it should be done by mutual agreement and mutual pleasure between the husband and the wife. So it's not a one-sided thing that the man just decides whenever he wants, he gets whatever he wants, but it should be done by mutual agreement and mutual understanding. So the plural here is used in the Arabic, and the plural ostensibly here was referring to the men, but grammatically the plural can refer to both men and women. So it could be that, when you are all in agreement, meaning the husbands and their wives together are in agreement, then they should seek to do this together, mainly in my translation, to seek to have children. Okay, so let me move on. Verse 224. وَلَا تَجْعَلُوا اللَّهَ عُرْضَةً لِأَيْمَانِكُمْ أَن تَبَرُّوا وَتَتَّقُوا وَتُصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Do not make Allah an obstacle through your oaths to being pious and God-weary, and to bringing about concord between people. And Allah is all-hearing, all-knowing. What this seems to refer to is that sometimes people will swear an oath, and they will use the name of Allah in that oath. They say, by Allah, I will not do such and such a thing. So now, on careful analysis, what they're swearing that they will not do, that was a good thing. That they should have done that good thing. But now, because they've sworn, now they're saying, okay, because I've sworn to Allah that I won't do this, now I can't do it. So you ask them to do a good thing, and they say, no, I've already taken an oath by Allah that I can't do that thing. So this verse is saying, don't let that be an obstacle, to preventing you from doing good things. Being pious, for example, being aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, carrying out the commands of Allah, bringing about concord between people, doing good in general. So Allah is all-hearing, and he is all-knowing. So he hears and he knows and he understands what you meant. Maybe at the time you didn't really realize this, and that brings us to the next verse. So لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم ولكن يؤاخذكم بما كسبت قلوبكم والله غفور حليم. Allah shall not take you to task for what is unconsidered in your oaths, but he shall take you to task for what your hearts have incurred, and Allah is all forgiving, all forbearing. So what this is referring to then is obviously that somebody may have said something, he swears by in an oath, but he didn't intend all aspects of what he said. Maybe the way he said it, it implies some things, and now he feels himself locked in because he said the words. But if he had not actually decided upon those things, if that was not intentional, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, no, you don't have to live by that oath because it was not intentional. Allah will not seize you for what you have said unintentionally. It's what your hearts have settled upon. That is the thing that will either bring you good or bad in terms of reward or punishment. Okay. So للذين يؤلون من نسائهم تربص 4 أشهر فإن فاءوا فإن الله غفور رحيم. For those who forswear their wives, it shall be a period awaiting for 4 months. And if they recant, Allah is indeed all forgiving, all merciful. Let's look at their footnote. And that is, by pronouncing ila, a pre-Islamic practice which allowed the husband to take an oath to refrain from sexual relations with his wife, which left the wife in a state of uncertainty for an indefinite period. According to this verse, the husband must decide within 4 months either to restore the marriage or to divorce her. And this is one example of the ways in which the Quran was uplifting the status of women and doing away with many of the injustices which women were suffering from at that time. So a man in that society could have said, I'm swearing I'm not going to have anything to do with my wife now. So now the woman is there in the home and she is kind of left hanging. She's not free to leave because she's still married to this man. And yet he's not treating her as a wife and he's not fulfilling his manly duties with her. So in the meantime, he might be free to marry somebody else because that was a polygamous society. It was easy for a man to marry a second, third, fourth, even more than that, a large number of wives. So the poor woman would be left there without any recourse. So now the Quran places a limit on that practice. So without canceling it out altogether instantaneously, the Quran is saying, look, you have 4 months. That's the limit. So make up your mind. Do you want to keep your wife or do you want to divorce her? You can't just leave her hanging. So then, if as the next verse says, وَإِنْ عَزَمُوا الطَّلَاقَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. But if they resolve on divorce, Allah is all hearing and all knowing. And then the following verse so the previous one. If we can't, this is for 226 again. Let me read that one more time. For those who forswear their wives shall be waiting for 4 months. And if they recant, Allah is indeed all forgiving, all merciful. So they have the 4 months limit. If within that 4 months, or just at the cusp of that 4 months, this is the limit. He says, okay, now I decided to keep my wife. That's fine. Allah is forgiving and He is merciful. He's not going to take that previous pledge. The man pledged, I'm never going to go back to my wife. And now at the end of 4 months, he is made to recant. He wants his wife. Okay. So Allah is forgiving and merciful. Allah, won't insist that he must stick by the pledge which he already made. And the next verse, وَإِنْ عَزَمُوا الطَّلَاقَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And if they resolve on divorce, then Allah is all hearing and all knowing. So Allah now knows the whole situation, and the matter is as decided. So the husband doesn't want his wife anymore, so a divorce or a separation results from that. This is known in Islamic law as ila. The man's taking an oath to not be with his wife. Now, I want to return to the first verse in our study tonight that we didn't look at in greater detail. I just read the English translation to see how much time we will have. Now, in today's society, a lot of questions arise regarding interfaith marriages. So let's look at this one more time. وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنْ. Do not marry polytheistic women until they believe. وَلَا أَمَةٌ مُؤْمِنَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن مُشْرِكَةٍ وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ. For certainly, a believing woman, a believing woman who happens to be a slave, is better than the polytheistic woman who is free, even though she might impress you. وَلَا تُنْكِحُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنُوا. And do not marry off your girls. This is how I have put it. Here it says your daughters. The translators have put your daughters in brackets because it's not mentioned. So, but what is clear from the verb? It is the fourth form of the verb nakaha, which means to get married. Nakaha yankihu. And the fourth form is the causative form. So a man marrying off his daughter, that would be expressed by this verb, ankaha, which is the fourth form. So here the mudari, or the present tense, is given, present future tense, mudari is given, and it's in the negative imperative. So the men are being told, La tunkihul mushrikeen, do not marry off your girls to the mushrikeen. I've decided to translate it girls rather than daughters because it seems that precisely girls are in question here, because the minor girls who were married off at the time, because that was the nature of society, minor girls would be married off. They would be married off most naturally by their fathers, or if they for some reason the father is not there, then the next person who is responsible for the girl, usually a male member of the immediate line of descent. So the grandfather would be the person to have that responsibility. So it's not necessarily your daughters, because whoever is giving off the girl in marriage could be not necessarily the father. The second thing is that it would really be the girls who are given off in marriage, because whereas at that time it might have been possible for even grown women to be contracted in marriage by a proxy or by an agent or even by their male relatives. It was possible also for a woman to get married by herself. And we know, for example, that a woman came and offered to get married to the Prophet, peace be upon him. So a woman could actually enter into a marriage contract on her own, and this was the clear opinion of at least Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, among the major imams of the schools of Islamic jurisprudence. So it's daughters that would be in mind here behind this Quranic verses, because the women would marry by themselves, and in which case they would make sure that they did not marry a polytheist, and for this reason, the Quran is saying that the believing servant is better, at least better for marriage. That's the whole point here, than a non-believer, a polytheist in particular, even though that polytheist would impress you. Why? The Quran is giving the rationale here. أُولَٰئِكَ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى النَّارِ. They are the ones who are inviting towards the fire. وَاللَّهُ يَدْعُو إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ وَالْمَغْفِرَةِ بِإِذْنِهِ. And Allah is inviting you to paradise and to pardon by His grace. And He clarifies the signs for people so that they may take admonition. So Allah is giving us something here to think about. And you remember when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about alcohol, says in it there are some good, but the evil is greater than the good. So here too, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, okay, you might find one of the polytheists attractive, but it's better to marry even a servant person, because that person is on your faith, whereas the polytheist may be calling you away to the fire. Now, as I've said, I returned to this verse because in our present day, we get a lot of questions about marrying persons outside of the faith. This question naturally arises because people are working together, they're going to school together, they are in a mixed environment. Muslims and non-Muslims are working and studying close together. And so naturally people fall in love and they want to know, can I get married to this other person? So what do we say? So first, we recommend for everyone to marry somebody of your own faith, and not only of your own faith, but even within the broader faith of Islam, you will find that there are many different interpretations or many different approaches. So it's important to marry a person that you will get along with. Think about the family relationship and how that will be affected. So some things are very minor and they don't mean that much. But if we're dealing with major theological differences in particular, then this can affect a marriage. In fact, sometimes it's not only theology, but even with practice. For example, if you're, let's say, husband and wife, they're both following the same principles when it comes to determining the beginning and end of Ramadan. So now everything is fine within that one family, even though other people within the city may be practicing Eid on different days or starting fasting, ending fasting on different days. It doesn't affect you in the family household because within your household, you're all having Eid on the same day. But let's say within the same household, some people are following one way of looking at things, the other person is following the other way of looking at things. some have Eid one day, some have, Eid the next day. It would mean that when some people are having Eid, some others are fasting. And so let's say, the husband is having Eid, but the wife says, no, today I'm fasting. So you can see where a slight disagreement can result within the family situation, tensions can arise, and it is better to avoid such situations. Sometimes we don't know that this will arise because you might marry another person and you thought that everybody was on the same page with things, and then it comes to the time of Eid, and then you realize that suddenly, the husband or the wife came under some other influence. Maybe they watched a YouTube video and they were convinced by the arguments therein, and they thought, okay, no, Eid is not today, it's tomorrow, and so on. So then you can have that discrepancy arising later. But the point is that while we cannot know the future, we can judge based on what we know about the present. So in the present time, when you're deciding to get married, think about the things which can be deal breakers and the things which are not deal breakers. Okay, there are differences, but we're not going to, split hairs over those things. Let's, overlook those things because you're not going to find the perfect person. You have to decide on the person that you choose and assure yourself that this is the perfect person. We're not marrying angels, we're marrying other individuals, and other individuals are going to have different opinions, different worldviews, and so on. But on major things, you want to make sure that you agree in advance so that there's no disagreement later on. So if there are theological differences, then you can see how this can affect a marriage. Now, with marrying a polytheist, because Islam is so strictly monotheist, then you can see that this can give rise to misunderstandings and tensions within a marriage. Let's say you have a polytheistic wife, and you as a man, you're trying to do everything and please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't want any idols in your house. So where's your wife going to keep the idols? So this will be an issue. And even if she keeps it in a particular room and you say, okay, this is the room for the idols, I have nothing to do with that. Now, what about when you have children and now the children want to know, can I go into that room? And dad says, no, don't go there. The idols are there. And the mom, calls them in quietly when the dad is not around, and so on. So you're going to have these kinds of disagreements that will occur, and they can cause tensions within the future marriage. And most clearly, as you can see now from my last mention of children, that it can have a detrimental impact on the children. If both parents are of the same faith, then naturally they're giving the singular message to their children. This is the right faith, so that the children can at least be enthused about one faith. It may be that our next door neighbor is telling their children that another faith is the right one, and that's fine. At least their children are being guided to follow a particular faith, and they can follow it with conviction, and they can restrict themselves within the moral code of that faith, which would be good because all religions are teaching good things. And that's fine, that your neighbor has a different faith and they're educating their children and indoctrinating them in a different faith. But you in your own household, you want to also indoctrinate your children in your faith. You want to teach them, at least in the formative years, when they grow up and they have a discerning mind of their own, they will choose their own faith. You have no control over that, and you shouldn't have no control over that. For faith to be pure and sincere, it has to come from the individual. But in the formative years, just as you have to decide many things for your children, for example, you have to decide that they must take a bath. You have to decide that they must take medicine, even though they don't like the medicine. So it's not up to the choice of the child. When they become adults, if they don't want to take medicine, you're not going to force it down their throat. But when they're children, minors, then you have to give them medicine if they are sick. And these are the doctor's orders. The child is saying, no, I can't, I don't like this medicine. Yeah. You still have to make sure that they get their medicine by coaxing and whatever in a good way. So in a similar way, when you know that the faith of Islam is like medicine for your children that will save them from eternal unhappiness in the life hereafter, then naturally you have to take on the responsibility of passing on that faith to them. But if mom and dad are in two different faiths, you can see how difficult this will be, because the old story when the child wants a toy and dad says you can have it, and the mom says no, you can't have it. then, the child knows who to ask. Next time he'll ask the dad. And if the mom says no, the child will say, but dad says I can have it. When it comes to religious matters, you can have the same thing being played back and forth, where, the mom says that one thing is right and the dad says, no, the other thing is right. And the child, doesn't know which one to pick and may actually pick and choose to his or her benefit from time to time. What we notice from interfaith marriages largely is that the children tend to grow up not being committed to either the faith of mom or dad. Sometimes they deliberately say, we're going to choose a third faith because we don't want to upset either mom or dad. I don't want to choose mom's faith because that's partial towards mom. I don't want to choose dad's faith because that's partial towards dad. I'm going to pick another faith altogether. And mostly they don't pick any faith. They just remain like agnostic, non-committal to religion. And so the whole future of the generations of this couple can be affected by the fact that they chose to marry outside of their faith to begin with. So we encourage people to marry within your own religion, and even so within a narrower sort of definition of your religion. Not that you're excluding others and you're saying, okay, the others are going to Jahannam or anything like this, but you want to make sure that there will be harmony in your marriage. So you're marrying people that you are as compatible with as is possible. Now, having said that, there are Muslims of a wide variety of different levels of commitment to the faith. I'm not saying this to be judgmental. I'm just saying it as a fact. Nobody will deny that this is true. Even some who are not so very well committed to the faith will tell you so plainly in their own words. They will say, look, I'm a Muslim, but I'm not so much committed to my faith. So if a person is of that nature, then, they know themselves to be Muslims. Then when they interact with others, their eyes are wide open to any possibility. They can marry, in their own minds, they can marry anyone because everyone is to them of equal worth. And as human beings, we all agree that everybody's of equal worth. But I mean, as suitable partners for marriage. So the person who is not so very well committed to the faith of Islam may have a broader scope in selecting a possible suitor, whereas somebody who is more firmly within the faith, they know that some things are so dear to us. So how are we going to share a life of intimacy with somebody who does not hold dear the same things? So let me give another example here. Let me say that you're looking at somebody comes to make you an offer to get married, and that person says, "But you know what? I don't like your parents." So this will be for many people this will be a deal breaker from the start. If you don't like my parents, then why are we even having this conversation? So it may be a different thing if two people first fall in love and now later on it turns out that one does not like the parents of the other. Now this is a problem to get over, but the underlying commitment is already there through the established love. But if a Muslim is starting out to think about, whom I want to get married to, then naturally you want to start with somebody who will appreciate not only your parents, but somebody who will appreciate your God, who will appreciate Allah Azza wa Jal, the Lord and God of the entire universe, the God of that person as well. So if you are looking at somebody who you know to be a polytheist, or let's say a total denier of the faith altogether, somebody who's an atheist, doesn't believe that God exists, then how are you going to have a life of intimacy with that person? Let's say you're sitting down, you're watching a television show, and something comes up on that show that spurs your spouse to say, "Oh, you see, that shows that there's no God." Then what are you going to do at that time? Are you going to have an argument and say, "No, wait a minute, that's wrong. There is a God. Allah exists. Allah is true." So you're going to have an argument then and there, and it won't even only be once. It will happen again and again and again. And it doesn't have to be about the existence of God. It could be the possible existence of plural gods or many different representations of that one God. Maybe you're watching a Bollywood movie and, it depicts some Hindus and they are doing their pujas. They're worshiping their idols. And, one person is there appreciating that, and the other person is saying, we can understand that they're doing that because they're Hindus, but, the guidance that we have shows that, this is not acceptable. We can't do this. So that itself can turn into an argument. And if husband and wife are in two different faiths about this, and they might start arguing in front of the children. So whereas everybody sat around to watch a Bollywood movie, parents and children together, instead of this leading to family harmony and a good quality time with the family, it leads to disharmony and family disunity. So as much as possible, we encourage the brothers and sisters to marry within their faith. Now, the Quran allows for men to marry women from among the people of the book, chaste women to be sure, but women generally, we can say simply. And this comes in Surah Al-Ma'idah. Now, what about that? How does that passage compare with the present one? How does it link with the present one? Well, we know that in the Quran, the Christians are not referred to as polytheists. They are referred to as people of the book. That's not to say that they do not commit shirk. The Quran finds some Christian beliefs to be reprehensible. And the Quran says, for example, those who say those who say that God is Jesus, son of Mary, have disbelieved. They disbelieve who say that God is the third of three. So God, the Quran is condemning some Christian beliefs, and yet the Quran does not refer to Christians as polytheists. So even though a Christian may be committing shirk by associating Jesus salam with Allah Azza wa Jal, the Quran does not call them polytheists. So what is the difference? Well, one writer, Farid Ishaq, in one of his books, he points out that there is a difference between a person doing something from time to time and a person being like a professional at it. So the person who is professional at it will get the professional designation. Let's say somebody writes a poem. That doesn't make the person a poet. So the poet, to say that the person is a poet, unless we mean it like by way of jest, to say that the person is a poet, that means the person reaches a certain level of competence in that field. So in a similar way, because Christians profess monotheism, the Quran is taking them at their word, and the Quran is not calling them polytheists, even though they might be associating Isa alayhi salam with God, and thus in practice they are committing shirk or polytheism. So in this way, the Quran then allows for men to marry women of the people of the book by its explicit statement. But what does that mean for women? Does it mean that women can also marry men from the people of the book? And to say no would lead to the conclusion that there is a kind of a discrepancy, an unequalness on the whole thing. Why would men be allowed to marry outside of the faith, but women are not allowed to marry outside of the faith? Well, if we interpret it that way, we might defend this by saying the following. Women at the time needed to be protected by their families and their tribes. When a woman got married, often she would have to, if she married outside of her tribe, she would have to leave her tribe and go to live in her husband's tribe. Now, in that case, her safety and her security and well-being could not be guaranteed. But when she is within the family situation, she's still within the tribe, then her father, her brothers, her uncles, and so on, can be there to look out for her welfare in case she's being ill-treated, in case there is violence being done to her. They can be there for her protection. So there was every reason for people at the time to ensure that the women just married within the tribe. But if a man married and left the tribe, it wasn't so feared that harm would come to him, because after all, in that traditional society, it was a man's world. A man would fend well for himself. So it was with this in mind that when the Muslim community by itself was there among many hostile forces, seeing itself like one of the tribes, as a body of people that must take care of their own, then it was not seen to be conducive for women to marry outside of the Islamic faith. Because if, as Muslim jurists would have put it, if a Muslim man marries, let's say, a Christian woman, and then he will be obliged to ensure that her faith is maintained. He has to guarantee her the right to follow her religion. And that's because of Islamic law being imposed on the man who's following Islam. Now, if on the contrary, a non-Muslim man were to marry a Muslim woman, we cannot be sure that he is following a law which will ensure that he has to grant the freedom of religion to his wife. And then what happens to the progeny? So if a child in Islamic classical societies was born, that child was thought to automatically follow the faith of the father. So the child would be reckoned as a Muslim in society automatically. So now, if in that ancient sort of presupposed social situation, a Muslim woman married a non-Muslim man, then the children born to the family, born to this couple, will automatically assume the religion of their father, which would be a non-Muslim religion. And so for all of these reasons, it was seen in Islamic law that it could only happen one way. A man could marry a Christian woman, but it could not happen the other way. A Muslim woman could not marry a Christian man. Now, as I said, the question comes up in modern society because women are and men are interacting with each other in the workplace and in the study situations, and they fall in love, and then they come to the imams and say, can we get married? One is a Muslim, the other is a Christian. And if we say to the Muslim women at that time, no, you cannot marry the Christian man, then the question of equality comes up, and so on. So looking at this situation in greater detail and with all of its complexities, I have given some indication about this in one of our previous discussions of Let the Quran Speak, and that video must be on YouTube by now. Dr. Khalid Abu al-Fadl, who is a scholar trained in traditional Islamic learning, but is also a law professor in California, has written many books, and on his website, which you can find by the name Scholar of the House, he has actually given some indications about this as well. Let me start with a problematic thing that some scholars have noticed. In the United States of America, you often have a situation where a woman embraces Islam, but her husband doesn't. So now she becomes a Muslim, but her husband is a Christian. What's to be done? So classical Islamic law says that her marriage becomes immediately severed. But that is an overstatement from classical Islamic scholars, because in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, time would have been given for the husband to see if he might come around and embrace the faith as well. So it's not an automatic severance of the family relationship. So it's not an automatic severance. But then how long can you wait? There is no time stipulation. And if we say to the woman, no, your marriage is automatically severed, then you can imagine the family upheaval and all of the legal ramifications of saying that this marriage is just totally severed just because the woman embraced the Islamic faith. And then what impression does this give to the non-Muslims? Okay, a woman embraces the Islamic faith, and then our marriage, suddenly is torn apart. They would see this. They would see Islam as something bad that causes disruption within the family, especially if the woman, the family has children and so on. So there are all of these difficulties. So with these difficulties in mind, some scholars, especially in the United States of America, have come to terms with this and thinking that, okay, if the woman embraces the faith, though her husband remains a non-Muslim, she can just continue in her marriage, but try to work on her husband to see if he might come around to the Islamic faith. Of course, if it becomes unbearable for the woman to live in that situation, it'll be up to her in the future to file for a divorce. But so that's one situation that you can see the practical need to revisit. The other situation is where a Muslim woman falls in love with a non-Muslim person wants to get married to that person, especially in particular a Christian person. And then the question is, could they get married in this situation? Well, we've already shown that in past societies, there was great emphasis on protecting the Muslim woman because of the nature of society at the time. Now we can see that the situation has largely changed around. Now, for example, if you think about custody of the children, in the past societies, the custody might have been given to a mother while the child is in the very formative years. But soon after that, the child will be taken away by force of law and given to the father. So, which will be totally heartrending for the mother, and especially so if the child is going to a non-Muslim father. But now, in our present societies, at least in the modern developed world, we are finding with the advancing rights given to women, in Canada in particular, if there is a split up, often the children will go to the mother. So the mother has some protection that way. The second thing is that the law will protect the woman against domestic abuse like never before, to the extent that if a woman were to call the police to say that her husband is abusing her, then if the police then arrive at the scene and the woman changes her mind and feels sympathy for her husband and says, no, that was all a mistake, still, once the report has been made, the police will proceed and they will deal with the husband based on the initial complaint. So the woman has a great degree of protection in modern times. And in terms of freedom of religion, this is a known axiom of modern society, that everybody as individuals have freedom of religion. So a woman could not be coerced to follow another faith. Of course, a lot of things happen within the private family situation. So we're not saying that everything is ideal, but at least the law is guaranteeing the freedom of religion for each individual within the family, adults that is. And so the man could not force his wife away from her religion. So in that case, we see that some of the old arguments against a woman marrying outside of the faith, especially to a Christian or a Jewish person, do not actually hold so well anymore. But the one thing does remain, that if you are sincere and devoted to your faith, the question for you is, how would you share a life of intimacy with somebody who is denying the very things that you hold so intimate and dear? So if one person is saying, I believe that Jesus is God, and the other person is saying, no, I believe he's not God, like, how does that work? How do the two minds come close together? There may be some physical attraction, yeah, but the physical attraction will wear off. And as the couple ages together, they may find that they're more attracted to each other in terms of mind and mutual understanding, rather than by physical attraction. So when it comes down to these matters of mutual understanding and mental things and issues related to belief and theology, then these could really have a detrimental effect on the marriage if the two persons are not seeing eye to eye on core issues. So in the end, we say that even though the classical Muslim scholars interpreted the Quran, and yes, it is clear from the Quran that men are allowed to marry women from among the people of the book, still, in our modern times, we would say that even men should not avail themselves of that classical permission, and they should see that in our modern context, it's not beneficial for them to marry a woman outside of the faith. Because remember what we said about the rights of women. If there is a split up of the family, maybe the children will go to the mother, and we find many cases of this. Brothers come and they are crying because their children are being taken away from them, given to their divorced wives, and the wife is not Muslim. So they're worried about the future of the religion of their children, and there is nothing they can do about it. So we're saying even men should not marry outside of the religion. And in fact, we can note that Umar radiallahu an, way back when, had already prohibited men from marrying outside of the faith. and for a different reason. He saw that with men marrying outside of the faith, that would leave Muslim women without suitable suitors, since women could not marry outside of the faith. So he saw a good reason to restrict men from marrying outside of the faith as well. So in today's context, what would we say? We would say, yes, to retain equality, and neither men nor women should marry outside of the faith. But if we ask on technical grounds, is a woman allowed to marry a Jewish or Christian man, just as a Muslim man is allowed to marry a Jewish or Christian lady? I would say that I do not see that there is a strong reason to consider that prohibited. So I will leave the discussion at that for my main presentation for today. And let me then just wrap up and show where we go from here. So, so far we've been looking at new laws for a new community, much of the last half of Surah Al-Baqarah, and under that broader heading, last week we dealt with Allah's answers to people's questions, and today we have dealt with marriage matters. For next week, what do we have in mind? Starting with verse number 228, we will be dealing with divorce issues, 228 to 232. So that follows right from our discussion about marriage matters. And then what else remains? Some remaining topics are family financial responsibility, charity, and commercial law. So we're winding down towards the end of this chapter. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring us again and again to these tafsir sessions together. And in the end, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will gather us under the shade of His mercy on the day of judgment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unite us in Jannah forever. And I pray for all of you who have been joining us from around the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you, protect all of your loved ones, give you every happiness in this life and the life hereafter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save you from COVID-19 and every other disease and stress and distress. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you barakah in your earnings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you success in your academic careers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of your lawful desires. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring us back together for the next tafsir halaqah next week, same time, inshallah. And in the meantime, tomorrow night, I will be in a convention with the Caribbean American Muslim Association. And when I have the link for that, I'll post it on my Facebook page. I'll be on at about 7 p.m. Toronto time. And then on Sunday at 1:30 in the afternoon, as usual, I'll have my usual Facebook post. And this Sunday, I will be dealing with the title Son of Man that Jesus attributed to himself. Jesus' self-identification as the Son of Man. So we say, peace be upon him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless Isa alayhi salam and his mother and all who believe in him. So join me for all of these programs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.